Welcome to all of you who are just joining us. We're going to start shortly, but we're excited you came tonight to learn a little bit more, but also to engage with our panel around shaping education and thinking about part two of our conversation, not only around our decisions and who makes and how those decisions are made around education, but also the impact and having specific conversations with teachers and students and district leadership around that. So we're excited for you guys to join us tonight. Thank you so much for coming. We'll start shortly, about 1 more minute. All right, well, welcome everyone to tonight's event. We're excited to have you join us. This is our second session, thinking about and talking through shaping education through decisions and also an impact, sponsored by Unity and Community North Mecklenburg. I'm excited to be with you this evening. My name is Brandy Nelson. I'm the Executive Director for Learning and Teaching here in Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. And I'm excited to join this panel, or actually to not speak. This will be the most I'll talk tonight. So you can hear directly from our teachers and our students about how educational decisions how they are experiencing the impact of educational decisions. So we're engaging around this critical topic around public education, and it's obvious how critical it is to our community and also to our world. Tonight, we're joined by several leaders in their field, and the panel discussion will prove to be both insightful and inspiring, I am sure. Again, my name is Brandy Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of Learning and Teaching here in Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. I will moderate the discussion, but you should not hear my voice too often because this panel is absolutely fantastic. But before we begin, I would love to honor a few norms with respect to the virtual experience. 1, please keep yourself on mute. Our structure will consist of a panel discussion, leveraging questions previously collected from our community. We will also solicit questions from our audience via chat. Please feel free to leverage the chat to post your questions. 2, you are welcome to turn your camera on or leave your camera off. This is entirely up to you and in terms of what you feel most comfortable with. As a reminder, in part 1 of this 2-part series, Shaping Education, Decisions and Impact, we learned more about the shaping of education in Mecklenburg County. This included the decision-making process, specifically related to education and curriculum at the federal, state, and local levels. We discussed things like the federal government's role in public education, the state's role in public education, including the powers that were regulated to the North Carolina State Board of Education, i.e. the approval of content standards, and the state superintendent of public instruction. We learned about the ways in which sometimes the North Carolina General Assembly sets educational standards by statute, i.e. the new Economics and Personal Finance Literacy Act, which resulted in an economic and personal finance course that's required. We learned about the ways in which the Department of Public Instruction, that's led by our state superintendent, defines and refines standards, as well as creating unpacking documents, crosswalk documents, things that help us be able to plan and map out curriculum that students experience every day in school. We also learned how our local boards of education set local policy, and how the local superintendent oversees the operation of our schools in our district. Local districts and central office staff then create these curricular materials that are coming from DPI and through policies that have been established by our local Board of Education, and or adopt curricular materials that align with the standards. In short, what we learned was that the decisions about what is taught in classrooms is determined by many actors, so federal, state, and local agencies. Tonight, we're going to dig a little deeper about this idea of, and this understanding around the impact of those decisions through the voices of our students, our teachers, and content experts in the field. We will spend most of our time tonight talking about social studies, specifically at the middle school and the high school level. But before we begin, I want to introduce our panel tonight, or give our panel an opportunity to introduce themselves. I'll start with our students. And so Brianna Fowler, who is the student advisor at large for the Charlotte Mecklenburg Board of Education. She's also a student here in Charlotte Mecklenburg, so I'm gonna give her an opportunity to introduce herself.
Greetings all, my name is Brianna Fowler. I am a current senior at North Mecklenburg High School, and I am very excited to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Next up, we have Gerald Sanchez. Mr. Sanchez, would you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Gerald Sanchez. I'm a current senior at Mallard Creek High School, and I'm also very excited to be here and spread awareness about what we can do to improve our education system.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. And Ms. Eden.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eden. I'm a senior at Charlotte Teacher Early College. I'm excited to be here and express my opinions that I've thought for a long time about the curriculum, but also hear from other people and listen to their thoughts as well. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Eden Perry Benton. We're also going to hear from our teachers. We have one teacher who's with us this evening, and then I have a district content specialist who will be joining us a little bit later. But first, we'll give Steve an opportunity to introduce himself to the group.
Hey, I'm Steve Araskovic. I teach at Randolph Middle School. I am a 26-year veteran of CMS, and I teach 8th grade social studies.
Thank you, Steve. Our district specialist, Danielle Lennon, should be joining us at some point, but I'll do a quick little bio about her. Danielle Lennon serves as the secondary social studies specialist here in Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. She's been in education for over 17 years and has served on local community foundations and also on local boards. She's a self-proclaimed foodie and a lover of all things family. So we look forward to hearing from her when she arrives this evening. I also want to acknowledge CMS Board of Education member at large, Jennifer De La Hara. She will be monitoring the chat, answering questions and providing answering questions and providing insights and answers to our panel, our participants here tonight. She also will be posing questions to the panel from our audience. So any questions that our audience members bring. Jennifer, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you very much. Again, Jennifer De La Hara, school board member at large. I'm just so grateful for both Dr. Nelson and Ms. Lennon, who's coming in a moment, Mr. Reskovic, and our fabulous students for coming and sharing your truths and letting us hear from you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you. So with that, let's begin. So we'll start with our first question, which is going to our teacher. And we would love to learn a little bit more about, given your extensive experience, Steve, in teaching social studies in Charlotte Mecklenburg, how have you seen the social studies standards / curriculum change over those years?
They have gotten more conceptual over time. Originally, when I started, there were very discrete moments in US history that we would teach about, different people, etc. It's moved toward an inquiry lens. It's moved toward more of, or less of the people, the places, the dates, and more of the why we did certain things in history, why things happened, how they affect the future. More reading documents versus secondary sources, and having the kids try to understand what's going on through their own lens with the inquiry. And that's where we are now. The new standards are very much more inquiry based than the previous standards. The standards before them, we're looking more at primary source documents and trying to make an understanding through the use of the documents. So much less textbook, more authentic.
Thank you. Thank you. And given that, what guidance would you give to teachers around teaching those standards, these new standards that you're talking about? What guidance do you give to teachers, knowing that you coach many of them over the years?
Use the documents, use the natural curiosity of the students to guide where you go and how you get there. And question everything. Don't be the sage on the stage doesn't necessarily do it anymore. You're not imparting the knowledge to the kids, you're helping them root out and discuss why, I guess. It always comes back to the why things happen.
Excellent. And so you've teed up perfectly our next question, which is to our students. And so I'm interested to know from our students, we all enter spaces with wealths of different identities. And so, for example, race, class, gender, identity, religion, political affiliation, physical ability, geography, etc. And we're interested to know, in what ways have you seen your identity or other identities affirmed throughout your experience as a student? Where has your student experiences fallen short? And what would you suggest?
I would like to talk about this since this is something that I'm very passionate about. I feel like over the years, the US education system has definitely made some improvements, adding different courses to represent students of color and students that come from different backgrounds. But I feel like there's definitely a disconnect or a lack of courses that really represent the big picture of what is American history. And that often relates to kids of different backgrounds, ethnicities, such as LGBTQ, indigenous people not being represented. And that can sometimes lead to a lot of a feeling of not being seen, of people feeling isolated. And I think that's something that needs to change at large, just to give a bigger picture of what really is American history, which is a representation of all of us from all different paths of life. So that's where I feel like the education system is really falling behind, but there's definitely been some progress, and we need to build upon those foundations to, do better.
I definitely agree with Gerald. I feel like I have seen bits of improvement from the American education system, but like he said, also there's definitely some room for improvement. I think that when I see how my identity is affirmed, or what I'm taught about my identity, about my Blackness, about my Black womanhood, it is about pain, it's about hurt. In American history, it's not about really anything that goes beyond that. I think when we think about, maybe Jewish history, we kind of solely go straight for the Holocaust. We kind of don't stray beyond that. And that's not just what the Jewish community about. That's not just Jewish history. And so I think when you're trying to affirm someone's identity, you can't just give them the things that have hurt them. You have to also give them things that, give them comfort that they can believe in. Because I think, okay, I see slavery and I see civil rights, but I know my people are more than these things. I know that they've done, that they've made incredible, contributions to society, to science, to America in general. And so it makes me wonder, like, the people, places, and dates, they do matter in this context. So yeah.
Charles, you talked a little bit about what you have seen and what you've observed. And I would love to hear a little bit more about your personal experience, specifically as it relates to like what you have experienced as a student sitting in classes in Charlotte Mecklenburg over the years that you've been in Charlotte Mecklenburg. And that was for Gerald,
Um,
sorry.
oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you. Yeah, so I feel like my identity, it has something that, has come from a lot of different places. I have struggled, to find my identity in these courses, especially social studies and American history and all the different courses that NCVPS allows you to take, which has often defaulted me to take Spanish courses to, learn a little bit more about my history. But that's really not the point. The point is to have these courses to empower the kids who are taking them, as I said, to feel seen and feel that you're important. I feel like what Eden talked about is very significant, showing the beautiful about different cultures, backgrounds, ethnicities, because that is really what empowers students, to feel more connected with where they come from and feel more comfortable in their own skins.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to ask our teacher, as you know, House Bill 324, Ensuring Dignity and Non-Discrimination in Schools, specifically states several elements that should not be promoted in public schools. A short list includes: one race or sex is inherently superior to another race and sex. An individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive. An individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. An individual solely by the virtue of his or her race or sex should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress. The United States was created by members of a particular race or sex for the purpose of oppressing members of another race or sex. So this was House Bill 324. It was vetoed by the governor on September 10th, meaning it did not go into law, according to my social studies, like the social studies I learned. How a bill becomes a law, the governor's got to sign it. And now sits in the House Rules, Calendar, and Operations House Committee. However, or in addition to, the social studies standards that were revised before approval by the North Carolina State Board of Education to include the removal of systemic before racism and discrimination, and also replace gender identity with just identity. So as a teacher, and Danielle, welcome Danielle to our panel. So Steve and Danielle.
I apologize.
No worries. Steve and Danielle, interested to learn a little bit, how do you, as a teacher and a district specialist, navigate the topics when a student brings up systemic racism, for example? What happens when they open the door? Steve, I remember you saying earlier that we should be leveraging the natural curiosity of our students and not be a sage on the stage. How do you do that?
If they bring it up, they can talk about it. I have no problem with them doing that, but it needs to be in a way that is referencing the history and looking at, again, going back to, why did this happen? How do we fix what's coming in the future? Trying to use the lessons of the past to move forward.
I often encourage teachers and teachers and anyone, I guess, who's in the classroom with our new standards to just approach the topic with equity of voice, both listening and ensuring an environment of mutual respect and providing that safe place to really explore and have a courageous conversation. It's okay to walk through the door. The key when you walk through the door is properly navigating the room.
Mm. And I would love to know, maybe from Brianna or Eden or Gerald, what your experience has been if and when these topics show up or come up in class.
I think due to the new curriculum, the outcomes could vary based on the teacher and the teacher's bias. When a certain topic comes up, the bias based on the teacher can be prevalent and heard by the students and felt, hence why the students may go about the curriculum or the class in a different way after the teacher's input. My teachers because I'm in the International Baccalaureate program at my school, it emphasizes learning and holistic approach and really looking at global issues. However, that does not mean that all my teachers are made equally. I had to switch out my freshman year history class because of my teacher and her implicit bias that was felt during the class, posing questions. I'm not going to even say what she said, but some of the commentary that was made by the teacher was very unnecessary and showed the bias that she felt against certain students. History class can be a very difficult class to teach as a human being. We all have our own biases, and it is very important to state as a nonpartisan party when teaching history. I hope that answers my politically correct question.
I'm so glad my question was politically correct. Thank you. And it's really about your experience. That's what this is. It's about your experiences and hearing your experiences. So thank you, Brianna, for being so vulnerable and sharing those experiences. We'd love to hear from either of our two students on our panel.
I like what Danielle and Brianna brought up. Definitely is about having a safe space within the classroom, since that is what makes you want to open up to your peers and start those conversations and those discussions that ultimately lead to positive views on history, or can change your mind completely about a certain topic that can be hurtful to other communities. And when a teacher fails at providing that self space, or fails at providing that classroom environment where you feel that their biases won't shine through to hurt or to invalidate someone's experiences, is what's very beneficial to students. And I think it's something that should be part of the training that they get, especially since right now with the political climate and the social climate that we're living in, a lot of things can be offensive. A lot of things can, hurt people, and it's up to everyone really, not only our generation, but people as a whole, to learn how to navigate respectful conversations. And that everyone knows that really starts in a history classroom.
And I think it's good to point out that, not everyone can be politically correct all the time or whatever. Not everyone has the same standards. It's important that teachers listen to students, like if in that case it's brought up, instead of deflecting or trying to use their degree to kind of, go against a student. Oh, I have a degree in this, like I know what I'm talking about. When it's just about listening to your students who, are maybe they're a part of what you said, I identify in that way. But I think teachers listening to students is very important when it comes to that as well. Because I've had instances of teachers like, I've been doing this for however many years, but sir, I am a Black person, and that word you just used was not okay. And I feel like, and it takes a student out of the classroom when they have to feel like they're constantly battling against a teacher, trying to fight for their own identity, fight for their own humanity, in a sense, inside a classroom.
Precisely. That's exactly what is needed to be said. And that is not a curriculum issue, but a training and professional development issue that is occurring within our school system. For instance, when my teacher said in my freshman year history class, only Black people, she specified, raise your hand if you've ever read Harry Potter. I'm not really a Harry Potter book lover, but I do love books. I did not raise my hand, and nor did a lot of other Black students raise their hand. And she proceeded to say, well, that's evident that Black people don't really read, and proceeded with her lesson. Mm. Or walking in the classroom, our Black students walking in the classroom, a Black male in particular saying, hey, monkey. That is an issue, especially being a history teacher, that cannot go unsaid. Like, there are issues that history teachers have, and this is just one instance of a history teacher. as the student advisor, I've heard plenty of stories of instances that our history teachers are putting their bias onto the students. And this does not foster a good foundation of a great learning environment for our students. Students feel as if they're trapped, unheard, or even threatened by their teacher. They don't want to speak out against the authoritative power that be, so they tend to not do anything. They sit and observe and often check out of class. So their grades start to slip because they do not want to be learning in a disrespected environment. Just to show that I am a reader, here are some of my books. Although I'm not a Harry Potter lover, I do read, just to say.
I hope there will come a day when you never have to show your books in order to prove that you're a reader, Brianna. Totally appreciate all that you guys are saying and naming and just in bringing in front of us. You've listed this interesting dichotomy, and I'm going to ask Danielle and also Steve the same question around training. So you talked about like the standards. There's like the standards and curriculum, and then there's also the teacher's discretion about how they are implementing that curriculum, right? And that discretion is what shows up in that space when the teacher and the students are together in a room trying to make intellectual magic, right? So would love to hear from Danielle and also Steve. You've had a long history in our district around training. Would love to hear from both of you about, you know, what's the current state of teacher training, and specifically in addressing and commenting on the statements from our students.
Thank you so much. As of now, and with these new standards, it's a very exciting time because they're very broad and allow for teacher autonomy and student voice. So that is just one thing we're definitely celebrating. DPI and training and instruction not only creates the standards, but also provides guidance around having some of those courageous conversations. In CMS in particular, what we've done is we have pathwayed training. So within that training of content and best practice, there's also always a section dealing with race, bias, equity, power, and how to have those conversations in the classroom. So that is where we are currently with making sure teachers have the tools and the availability and safe feelings to address myself as the specialist, or higher ups if they come into any issues of concern.
And Steve?
Brianna, it sounds like we need a whole lot more of that training. I literally was stunned just listening to you a moment ago. I don't think that I'm perfect in any way, but oh my Lord, those mistakes, no. I hope the district is moving that way. We've had, since I've been here, social studies training has kind of ebbed and waned and flowed, moving more toward helping teachers understand how to do these things. I think it's obvious that we need a lot more of that training. Danielle will move us that way. Also with that, it's training on vertically aligning the different grade levels through middle and high school and making sure that we're not either duplicating sources or we know the conversations that are being held at the different levels, so that as you move into high school, there is a clear understanding what the students should know and possibly what they have discussed or what they could have discussed, so that the conversations can be deeper in high school.
Absolutely. I'm interested to explore a little bit further with our students. Are there issues in class or issues that come up that you you know are off limits. Like, it's like, I got the cue, I got the signal, or they feel like they're off limits from your perspective. We'd love to hear from our students about that.
As I stated before, I'm in the International Baccalaureate program. So I take different courses such as IB History of the Americas 2 and 1, also taking IB World History. My IB World History class was more straightforward, kind of like a regular history class mandated by the state. That's when I switched my teachers. My second teacher, Mr. Hunter, was amazing. I really loved him, although the second teacher, my first teacher, would still come in the classroom and ask if I was a troublemaker, which am not, and he would ensure her that I'm a wonderful student. And I loved Mr. Hunter for that, and really embracing all of his students and treating us all the same. My second class, IB History of the Americas, we would go over various topics. And he stated at the beginning of the school year, if we ever see anything that does not correctly portray us as a white male, he'll never know until we tell him. And as long as we give him correct facts or evidence, he will implement that into his curriculum, which I really loved that Mr. Bischoff, shout out to Mr. Bischoff, did that. Last year, for instance, we learned about Christopher Columbus and the truth about the whole finding America. And he did such a wonderful job teaching that portion, even when talking about the Black Panther Party. Some of the textbooks would say, use the words such as terrorists and etc. And I went into detail about how that is not true and the correct bias that are seen in the textbooks and how we should not teach that. And that really opened a door as a discussion for my class to see my classmates having the implicit bias from their parents and their families and breaking down those walls and barriers. I think that history in North Carolina can be amazing depending on the teacher. I've had both good and bad experiences. The bad, just a smidge, just a tiny bit, and I switched out. But other than that, I've had amazing experiences, but I've had amazing teachers. They're wonderful.
Yeah, so I want to commend everyone who, speaks out within their classroom environments. I was one of the persons who would often shy away from my identity or felt like I had to, just make it through the class just by doing my work, doing my curriculum, because I felt like my point of view or my own identity as a Hispanic man was not respected in the environment that I was. And it definitely came from commentary of bias or senses of invalidation from my teacher, from my history teacher. And that led me to conclude that, like, if a teacher feels uncomfortable, or if there's some certain biases around that teacher, a conversation shouldn't be shut down just because they don't feel comfortable like speaking about it. I feel like the conversation should be encouraged, and it should always be about navigating, learning how to navigate that conversation respectfully, so you can get different perspectives from different students. As how Brianna stated, history is always changing and there's always some bias in history no matter what you do, but it's about us and people around us to set history right, to share our experiences and really showcase how we can improve that and how we can fix those issues.
A quick follow-up question, and it's a little bit related to one of the questions in the chat, but I just wanted to go a little deeper, given the example that you've given. And I'm interested to know about how you moved from when you initially started in your education and being shy to this public advocacy that you're now doing. Like, what happened in those two spots? What happened?
So it was definitely a little bit of maturing from my part and realizing that I have a voice, realizing that I can use my voice to represent the people, other people like me, who might shy away from their identity or feel like they're invalidated within their school systems. And that's what has really prompted me to, work towards social advocacy and really talk about these problems. When I was a freshman, I would shy away from conversations, discussions. Even when I knew something wasn't portrayed right in history classes, I would often shy away from expressing my opinion out of fear of not being in a safe environment. And after going through high school and really learning more about myself and being more comfortable in my skin, disregarding what other people have said about what my identity represents and me knowing myself better, it definitely empowered me to go forward and really discuss these issues and, be a voice for people who might not have the same experiences as me, or who might not have the courage to do so.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. We have one question we have several questions in the chat, but I'm gonna pull this first one about, and I open this up to our students and or our teacher / district specialist. Interested to know how we can empower our district or empower and change. I'm gonna make Amanda, if you're okay, I'm gonna make a quick adjustment to, okay. How we can empower a district culture. Our district culture, where students feel safe to advocate for themselves as we move towards being an anti-racist district. We'd love to hear from the adults and the students on our panel, maybe one or two folks.
I would like to give a shout out to Piedmont IB Middle School, because I feel like we did just that. And Piedmont is where I learned how to empower myself, how to speak and be a leader and properly communicate. Mr. Reddick, my history teacher from 8th grade, taught me the importance of being quick to listen and slow to speak. He taught me how to listen to others when I was in 8th grade. I was just so eager to tell someone that they were wrong. However, I would never listen to what they were saying. And that is key when in these history discussions. You need to listen to what the other person is saying. Really absorb all the opinions, all the different aspects, because we do have implicit bias. I've learned so much being at Piedmont. I speak about Piedmont like people speak about their colleges. I love Piedmont. If every middle school could be like Piedmont, I would, because middle school is such a transitional year and we don't speak about that enough. Piedmont also had a leadership class where a small group of students were in 8th grade and they were pulled aside for one block each day and were given different exercises. Public speakers would come, motivational speakers, different events, field trips. And that really shows a student how to, one, conduct themselves and show different habits that were implemented in my 8th grade year that I still have as a senior in high school. We were given books. We have a notebook that we journaled in. I still have my notebook. I still refer to those notes. And so many students just need that. They need that person to see in them that I see you're a leader. I see you're a communicator. This is just how you should do it. This is how you should communicate your views. But because that's not embedded in our curriculum, which i.e. professional development, I think it should be in our professional development to teach our teachers that, to teach our students. I try to tell my little brother that, but then again, the way he looks at me, I'm like his mother, so he's not gonna listen. It needs to be in our school system. That's it. I love Piedmont.
Yeah, definitely going off Brianna, I feel like Piedmont, the best thing about Piedmont was the community. It was a pretty big school. But everyone kind of knew everyone, and for the most part, everyone got along. And it was just about the community. Everyone was there to learn. Everyone was there to grow, even though at the time I couldn't see that. And I was like, get me out of here, get me into high school. I couldn't see that until I got out, and I couldn't, and I was like, really, I couldn't find my place. Like, and for a little bit, I lost my voice, and I was just like, what am I trying to say? And then I remembered how in Piedmont, I was able to have teachers who were like, come on, Eden, you got to say it. You got to say it. You have to, you have to use your words, whether that's verbally or that's writing, and all the teachers who inspired me. And so I think when we're looking at how are we trying to grow that, I go to the teacher program, as I said, and making sure that we're creating teachers and we're teaching students that this is what it looks like, and fostering that really good community that is saying, you need to use your words. You need to say what needs to be said. That's the only way that you can get what you want to get done.
Yeah, I am so happy to hear that. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I'm so happy to hear that both of you had those great experiences. I feel like leadership is something that is not really talked about that much in education, and something that we definitely need to work towards, because and based on my experience going through middle school into maybe like my sophomore year of high school, I never really felt like I had a voice. Naturally, I'm a very calm down and laid back person, but leadership and how to conduct myself in public spaces was something that was really never taught to me. So for most of middle school all the way up to sophomore year, I always felt like I was in the background, and I didn't really feel like I had a voice to express myself and my thoughts. And it wasn't until I started taking those AP classes, taking advanced courses, that I found out through friends, as as none of my parents went to college. I'm a first generation student, so maybe that had also had something to do with it. But once I started to take these advanced courses and really, talk to teachers who believed in me, with teachers who usually had a better understanding of students, it really helped me to come out of my comfort zone. It really helped me to develop those leadership skills and really develop a voice. And that's why I'm so passionate about using it today and forward.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question to Steve and Danielle, specifically around what I'm hearing the students say around leadership and how that might show up in your teaching and also in the professional development that we provide. So Steve, how does leadership show up in the teaching that you do daily with your students?
If the kids are willing to drive the conversation, it's going to make things better for everybody. It'll take us to places where we can, again, Danielle said, have those courageous conversations. It just allows the kids to understand that their opinions matter. Kids are going to have opinions no matter what. It's trying to get them to understand, okay, where is the basis for your opinion? What are the facts you can bring forward? Where can you find the information to make an argument, to try to get in front of people and say, okay, here's how we think it should be. How do we bring that information forward and then get the change made? Because I think it's all about change. And if the kids really want it, they're going to. I mean, we're doing an academic enrichment block at my school this year, and my kids have already collected 100 or so signatures to work on our dress code and a couple other things at the school. So they're already advocating, and I'm simply trying to get them to understand, okay, how do we move this forward? Who do we talk to? How are you going to present the information? And it's extremely refreshing. I love it. And I'm glad that they're willing to do it. And if they're willing to do it, I will stand right there with them, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. And for students who might be reluctant, maybe they're waiting and to see what their teachers thinking or doing. How do you connect with those kids, those particular students? I hear there's a large conversation around relationship and around, belief in me and seeing me for who I am, et cetera. How do you go about building that?
You let them know that you're willing to listen. You acknowledge what they're saying. They know, and they'll put it out there, and they'll challenge you right in class. It's like, okay, yes, I believe that's true. It's like, why are you even asking me that? It's like, okay, because they don't know what I'm thinking. I know what I'm thinking, but they, once they see it, they'll go forward with it. And building those conversations when there is an issue with a student, then you can pull them aside, you can talk and say, hey, how are we going to handle this? What really is the issue here? Why are you upset? How can you help yourself? And then how can I support you in that?
One thing I find really positive around the social studies curriculum is it has a strand of taking informed action. So it's already ingrained into the CMS curriculum. What do I do next? Now that I am informed, how do I move this work? And it has examples, obviously, history does, of what leadership and the power of leadership and how over time changes were made by leadership. So using that as a backdrop and an example, I would also hope that our teachers model what it's like to advocate and let our voices be heard so that the students can follow suit and properly know the channels and how to navigate to be citizens and take those informed actions, especially in the area of leadership, whether that's SGA or just simply creating a club, being the leader on student council. Those are all powerful means in which you can enact informed action.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Steve. So I have another question for our students. I hope I haven't worn you out yet. My question is this: you get information from a variety of sources, not just school. What sources do you rely upon to learn more about history, humanities, social studies? It sounds like social advocacy in terms of the work that you guys do outside of the materials that you leverage in the classroom. So what other sources do you rely upon to learn about those things?
I'll say that my primary source is not school. My mom actually taught me early on that you don't really trust everything that is always taught in school. And she herself was a teacher at one point too. I think I've been very lucky that my mother has imparted that wisdom upon me. When she finds, links or whatever to something, she'll send it to me. She's like, you need to read this. This is important. You're into social advocacy. You're into Black liberation. This is the history of that. This is history that will help you grow that. And so that's what I guess my primary source isn't just my mother, but, things outside, I also read. When I have a question, I go, where can I find that? I go to books, I go to the internet, I go to documentaries. And so I think I've been very lucky to kind of have my mother tell me that you don't have to just stay here in this one place. You can go beyond that.
Yeah, for me, it has been a little bit different. I cannot count at school as my primary source of information for history because of the fact that most of my identity, most of my background is not represented in the history courses that are taught in school. And that really creates that issue of the lack of history courses that are being taught by a school district. And I know I'm not the only one who feels that way. There's multiple kids from different backgrounds, LGBTQ, indigenous people who don't know about their own history and who can't rely on school to be their primary source of information because they don't see themselves in those spaces. And that can be, again, something really hurtful as it leads to a sense of isolationism for all of these students. And so for me, for example, I mostly rely on things that I find in the internet, things that I know that are trusted. And like Eden, a lot of it also comes from reading and just discussing with different people in my life who I can trust to be as credible as I think. So yeah, I think it's a bigger issue of like school being a primary source of information because for a lot of kids, school can be relied upon because there's no information to go off because of the lack of history courses taught.
Yeah, and I want to clarify that I'm not saying that what teachers teach is wrong. I don't think that. I think that, like Brianna said, there can be some implicit bias in what they're teaching, or the entire story isn't being told. And so that's when I say, I'm not saying, Steve, that you know nothing about history, everything you're doing is wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just think that the entire story, or the story at all, like it hasn't even been introduced, like Gerald is saying, isn't always introduced inside the classroom. And so unfortunately, it has been taken upon the students to introduce that themselves. And I won't say unfortunately, because it's good that students might take initiative to go outside school. But I think also schools should also maybe provide more resources so that students can find that themselves.
My teachers actually encourage for students to do their own research. Many say that we're in our own echo chamber and we should look at different sources. That you see, I just love my teachers. They do a great job. So I have a great relationship with the history curriculum because my teachers are just amazing, but I think I left out.
Yeah, working towards an opportunity where it's not luck, right? In terms of the student experience. We've been talking a little bit about coursework. I wanted to make sure I asked a question specifically to Danielle. So a couple of years ago, Charlotte Mecklenburg made a decision to ensure that every high school was offering Latin American Studies and African American Studies as a course. Would love to learn a little bit more about how many schools are actually offering the course, how many students are enrolled, just getting a sense of, or a lay of the land in terms of that.
Coming from another district and coming here to CMS, I am just extremely excited at the opportunities that we are able to provide our students. For African American Studies, it is offered at 21 of the high schools with an approximately 1,500 students enrolled in these sections. And as far as Latin American Studies, it's offered at 17 schools with 674 students that are currently enrolled. Now, this is a different year, of course, right, with capacity and teachers and a little bit of shuffling, but that as a starting point, and several is offered in honors and a regular track. So that is definitely a huge development and growth from what we've seen in the past.
Have any of our students taken any of those courses? Oh, Brianna, you took that course? Okay. Mm-hmm.
I actually had the privilege of teaching African American Studies, and it is just an awesome, it's beyond just a survey of American history, but a deep dive into the beginning of civilizations. And that story is often the one that's left out. It all didn't start with the triangular trade, right? No. So I love that.
And I just want to clarify, African American Studies is an elective course, is that correct?
It is.
Okay.
It is an elective course. It is
an elective course. It is. And Latin American Studies is an elective course.
Mm-hmm. And I think the adoption of these new standards, Daniel, can you say a little bit about the adoption of these new standards and perhaps a relationship between that and the African American course and the Latin American course, if that makes sense what I'm asking? It may not make sense, I'm sorry.
Right. While the standards for African American Studies and Latin American Studies is not a new adoption, they provide informed and absolutely bring color and can provide a basis on which teachers can have the tools to have those conversations about culture, identity, race, bias, equity, and it serves as a wonderful complementary course to any history course. So I would highly suggest, if you have not already, if that is being offered at your school as an elective, to take it as a companion with either world or American.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Daniel. My last question for the evening is to our teacher, to Steve. You've been doing this for a while. I mean, a short while, and you've seen a lot of colleagues come and go. What keeps you going? What keeps you connected? Why do you keep waking up in the morning and doing it?
Because I really feel that I belong in the classroom. I think that I can help kids see the potential in themselves and learn a little history on the way, and then, you know, get them involved with it so that they start looking at it on their own, and they don't just see it as names and dates and places, but as this huge continuum of which they are an active part in.
Thank you. Thank you to Gerald. Thank you to Brianna, excuse me. Thank you to Eden. Thank you to Jennifer. Thank you to Danielle. It's been a rigorous discussion and a joy to hear voices from the field about our impact. Jennifer, did you want to say a few words also?
Yes, just to reiterate some thank yous, and mostly to you, Dr. Nelson, for leading us tonight in this fantastic discussion. I really appreciate your efforts, and to Ms. Lennon as well, Mr. Reskovic, and our students. Thank you, Ms. Fowler, for introducing us to, or to me, to Gerald and Eden as well this evening. Appreciate just your honesty and your vulnerability and speaking your truths. And this is exactly what we need to hear. I'm so excited this is being recorded because I'm already thinking of several people that I want to send this to. So I think that's good. I also do want to take a moment just to recognize that Senator Natasha Marcus has joined us. She doesn't have to speak if she doesn't want to, but I do want to take a moment to recognize.
Hey, everybody. Very
Thank
impressive
you.
to hear from these students. I love hearing from the students. So thanks for doing this unity and community. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I also want to recognize that former school board chair of the Board of Education of Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, Mr. Arthur Griffin, is here on the call as well. He can give us a wave if he feels so inclined. And also want to thank Unity and Community for sponsoring this event. You know, I attended an event a couple months ago that they held where they were bringing people together to talk about critical race theory, what it is and what it isn't. And from that conversation that day, which was a really robust conversation, came this idea of, you know, because, you know, we don't in Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools or in any school system that I'm aware of teach that, let's actually talk about what we do teach. And that was the genesis of this project. And that's why a few weeks ago, we came together and spoke about all those different levels of government and the influences from the decision makers that Dr. Nelson spoke about. And then part two today, of course, the most important part, hearing about the impacts on our educators and our students. So that's how this came to be. I'm so grateful for you all. And I wish you all a wonderful evening, and hopefully we'll come back together and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Great night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.